Hello, Cleveland. This is Alex Hoffman from the Too Much Effing Perspective podcast, and welcome to Quick Taps, short episodes with short stories for short attention spans. Today's episode is entitled You Con-Duit, Spinal Tap moments where our guest played the lukewarm water role that bassist Derek Smalls plays in the band Spinal Tap, that conduit between two powerful forces.
The two totally distinct types of visionaries. It's like fire and ice, basically. You see, and I feel my role is to, in the band, is to be kind of in the middle of that, kind of like lukewarm water.
Our first story comes from Rolling Stone magazine's 1994 Songwriter of the Year, Freedy Johnston, who connected two New York legends without really knowing either himself.
I was very infinity lucky to be invited to my dear friend Vince Scelsa's 50th birthday party at the now defunct Bottom Line. And I had no idea how honored I should have felt. Marshall Crenshaw, Joey Ramone, Lou Reed, Roseanne Cash, Joan Osborne, and Uncle Floyd. Just everybody was there. And Joey Ramone came up to me after sound check. I was doing This Perfect World, my one song. He puts his big soft hand on and says, "Hey man, I really like that song." I guess I didn't quite know that he was, he had cancer. And it was so beautiful that he was out there during sound check. I almost want to cry. It's like, all right, I'm done, And so we're hanging out backstage at the Bottom Line between acts. So we had this tiny little green room. Lou Reed's very uptight and is not talking to anybody. I felt so bad for him. Joey Ramone standing in the doorway, and I don't know what got into me. And I finally said, "Hey, Lou, you know Joey, right? Joey, you know Lou?" And they nodded to each other. I'm sure they had met before, but I tell you, that was like, talk about jumping off the high board when you get full of yourself. It was like, that's my most hubristic moment, if that's a word.
Our next Derek Smallsian moment comes from Scott Nathan, author of the Hollywood Tell-All, The Big Book of Bad Decisions. Honestly, I could have co-written that one with him. Scott was the middleman in getting Martin Scorsese's Academy Award-winning film The Aviator made, whether anyone knows it or not.
Back when I was an IT guy designing networks and supporting people at Universal and Disney, and this one production company client I'd picked up, just a little, like a trust fund kid who went to film school trying to be a movie producer. And the guy had great taste in material, but was never, for years and years and years, never able to get anything made. So one day I'm at his office and I knew all their properties. And I said, "Dude, what is wrong with you guys? How do you have such great material and you can never get a movie made?" And they were like, "Stay in your lane, IT guy. You have no idea how hard it is to get a movie made." And I said, "Let me ask you a question. Is attaching a movie star enough to get a movie made?" And they said, "Well, yeah." And I said, all right, if I attach a movie star to one of these projects, can I be second position producer? And they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Cool, put it in an email." So we do. So I took a couple copies of this book and I started talking to Leo DiCaprio's girlfriend, who was my best friend at the time, Kristen. And I'm telling her, not with this grand plan, just telling her about the life of Howard as I'm reading this very thick book, Howard Hughes' The Untold Story. And I'm like, "Did you know this guy invented the satellite? Did you know this guy invented the bullet bra?" And she was like, "No, this is amazing. The guy was a movie producer. He did the highest budget movie ever made. He was Microsoft before Microsoft. He didn't sell his drill bits to explore oil in the Earth's crust. You had to rent them from him. Amazing guy." I'd tell her these stories during the day. She'd start telling Leo these stories at night. Now Leo's reading the book and loving it. So now it's time to make my move. So I'd met Leo a handful of times, didn't know him well, but I had his number. So I call him and I'm like, "Leo." And he's like, "Hey, what's up, dude?" Like he was like not really that pleased that I'm calling him. I go, "Do you want to play Howard Hughes?" He goes, "Fuck yeah." And I go, "You need to go to my friend's office and shake his hand." He goes, "I don't have to do anything. I just did Titanic." He said, "Tell him to call Rick Yorn," which is his manager. And I said, "Are you in town?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm on Beverly." I go, "This guy's office is on Melrose. Go drive over to his office, shake his hand and tell him you want to be Howard. You'll be Howard. But if you don't, it's going to go to someone else." And he goes, "Like who?" And I'm on Sunset Boulevard and I'm looking at the 9,000 Sunset building. And there was a People versus Larry Flint billboard covering the building. I said, it's going to go to Edward Norton and Milos Forman. And the thing about movie stars is they are competitive. So he goes, Ed Norton? He's not Howard. I am Howard. I go, Leo, walk into his office, shake his hand and say, I want to play Howard Hughes. And he did. And it happened, and it ended up, that fib that I made up about Edward Norton and Milos Forman turned out to be true. They had a Hughes project in development. But Leo, coming off Titanic, was the ultimate checkmate. He was a board full of queens. So Johnny Depp had a Howard Hughes project. Jim Carrey had a Howard Hughes project. The Hughes brothers, ironically, had a Howard Hughes project. And Leo saying yes to this guy got The Aviator made. Did I get paid? No, I got stiffed. I didn't get my credit. And then the guy a year later felt bad and he gave me 10 grand.
And our final story comes from the Pulsars Dave Trumfio, who may have gotten Liam Gallagher from Oasis to pull out his Wee Willie Winky, all in the name of art.
So I was pretty good friends with Cynthia Plaster Caster, and Cynthia was like, oh, Dave, you guys need to introduce me to the Gallagher brothers. So, I go bringing Cynthia back into their production area, and we're getting all these stink guys like, what are you guys doing back here? And like, who is this lady? And I see Noel, and I'm like, hey, Noel, Dave from the Pulsars. Hey, I want to introduce you to Cynthia Plaster Caster. And the whole demeanor changes, and like, oh, Cynthia Plaster Caster. Oh, everyone stand at attention. So Cynthia's like, oh, where's your brother? I want to meet your brother. So it's like this whole kind of walking through this maze of production offices back to this one room that was strictly Liam's room. And it's like this huge room, like 40 by 40 feet. And in the middle of the room is a French scroll couch with Liam on it with a bunch of women. Like, I don't know if they're escorts or what, but it was totally right out of a movie. And then there's an ice sculpture and a guy wearing like a butler thing with a vodka bar. And we go in there and Liam's just like holding his hand up like the king, waving like, what the hell's going on here? And Noel rushes over and goes, hey, no, this is Cynthia Plaster Caster. And then he just completely goes out of character, stands up and like, oh, hey, how you doing? Like, it was pretty hilarious.
Thanks for connecting up with us for this TMEP Show Quick Tap. If you enjoyed it, please follow, rate, and review our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. And tune in next week when my co-host Alan Keller and I return for more Spinal Tap moments on Too Much Effing Perspective.
Although it would be as great as having armadillos in our trousers, this podcast is not affiliated with This Is Spinal Tap, and no person or entity connected with the film has sponsored or endorsed its content. The podcast is not affiliated, sponsored, or licensed by Authorized Spinal Tap LLC or Century of Progress Productions.
Too Much Effing Perspective is a Milwaukee Talkies original. Evergreen Podcast Network.